It has been a few months to say the least, but the Belleville Sens podcast is back for an important update because the push to the 2025 Calder Cup playoffs is officially on. Less than 20 games to go, and believe it or not, and I'm sure you can believe it, the Belleville Sens are stuck in a tight battle for the final spot in the North Division. And as I'm sure you can believe as well, it's going to come down to the final couple of weeks of the season. There is a massive homestand coming up here at CAA Arena starting this weekend, and we want to make sure you've got all the info you need to be caught up and ready to help support the Sens on the stretch drive towards their third Calder Cup playoff appearance in franchise history. This is Season 3, Episode 13, even though it's been a few months. David Foot and Brock Ormond, happy to be back with you here at CAA Arena. We are set up in DJ K-Lab's spot here on the south side of CAA Arena because we've got our March break open practice happening today, and there's probably 250, maybe 300 people in the building right now, which is great to see. All the kids are off of school this week and getting an up-close and personal look at the Belleville Senators, who have been up and down, Brock, since we last did a show before New Year's. December 30th was our last episode, and a lot has happened since then. Yeah,
there's been a lot, and a lot of ups and downs, like you said, peaks and valleys, and that's all part of what it takes to grind out a playoff spot in the AHL, and the Sens are right there in the mix, and against the Syracuse Crunch team that they've gone back and forth with this year, and to say that the Sens have been in a battle, it's been an understatement. They went 2-3 on the road trip, the most recent one through Pennsylvania and Laval and Hershey and Hartford as well. So it was a good effort all the way around. And with trade deadline and all that stuff involved, it can be a difficult task to try and keep everybody on the same page. But so far, it seems like the Sens have been that, and again, the battles have been great. There haven't been out of too many games, an 8-3 loss notwithstanding in Wilkes-Barre on Saturday, but you think the difference between wins and losses can come down to just one big moment or one big break, and that's what happened Sunday for sure against Hartford. But the last couple months have been quite good for the Sens in terms of their competitiveness. They had a great February, and so far about a 500 March, but they still have lots of time left and a lot of important games, and most of them coming at home, as you'll hear.
Yeah, and we're only a few games into March, so the fact that the Sens are 500 this month is not anything at all to worry about. January was not great. The team battled, as it always does, a lot of injuries and call-ups, but come February, something switched, and we always kind of say around the Christmas time that this team tends to go on a run around this time of year, around the turn of the calendar. This season it just so happened to come a little bit later, but boy, was Belleville fantastic in February, unbeaten at home all month long. They haven't lost at CAA Arena since January, mid-January, I believe, and they're going to need that home ice advantage here over the next 11 games. 10 of those will be played here at CAA Arena, and that's the 10 of the remaining 11 home games the Sens have in general. So they're going to have to turn this into a fortress, really make it a tough place to play, and they were able to, I think, build that foundation doing that in February with a strong month here.
Yeah, if there's any time to really create some separation and get your space against teams like Syracuse and Utica and start really pushing those top dogs, now's the time to do it. There's no other opportunity, and the Sens have been playing much better at home since the first half of the year, more consistent at least, and now this is their big opportunity, especially against their next two games against Bridgeport, a team that has really been scuffling this year. Belleville's beat them already. You got Cleveland, a team they beat twice already on the road, and teams like Toronto they always get up against. You got Rochester, a team that's always tough, so against the division especially, it's going to be crucial to try and bank those points. It goes without saying, and having big crowd support behind you can only fuel your tank going into to the last half of the season. But the Sens have been just outstanding at home, and CAA Arena really has been great in terms of that fan support that we mentioned, especially those Friday, Saturday games, that you're slowly starting to see the fan numbers rise as we get closer towards the end of the season.
Yeah, Belleville went 2-1, 0-1 in October. November, they only had 1 win at home. December, they only had 2 wins at home. But since then, it's gotten a little bit better. They were above 500 in January, and then, like I say, 5-0, 1-0 in February. So they did have one loss come in overtime here at CAA Arena last month. But, I think you can take a whole lot of confidence from the fact that you are playing better here at home. The downside has been that Belleville's gone from one of the best road teams in the league to being a little bit more average, let's say, with the results a bit more back and forth away from home. But they're back from a busy month. Again, we didn't do a show in February because the Sens played 13 games in 28 days, not to mention the 4 games they played in 7 days last week to open March. And now here they are. They can settle in at home. They can hopefully build some momentum around the fan support with things like this open practice that's happening today. And really, like I say, try to make this a tough place to play and continue on that roll here. It's going to be so critical for them. Yeah,
absolutely. And when you get the amount of games you have at your disposal, I mean, it's intentional when you got more home games on the slate down the stretch in March and in April. Because you want to have that advantage. And again, not to say that you're going to win every game, but at least you have the benefit of sleeping in your own bed. You got the benefit of your own facilities. You got benefit of last change. You got all that. And the familiarity of being inside the building that you play 36 games in a season and more in the playoffs. So Dave Bell and company should definitely not take this opportunity for granted, because it's going to be so crucial when you get down to those last few games. And if you banked a whole bunch of points on home ice, then you're in good shape. And it's the kind of thing that's so hard to quantify. But, at the end, it all balances out, and the record certainly speaks for itself here at CAA Arena. The last several games the Sens have played here have been just outstanding, and it also helps the bounces, too, and it seems like the Sens have gotten some fortunate breaks and, of course, have played some of their best games here at CAA Arena.
Yeah, absolutely they have, especially of late, and again, that is such an important thing come this time of year. They do have one more lengthy road trip coming up, still have to go back out east, go to Providence, go to Springfield. There's another stop in Rochester in there, which will be a critical game as well, and then ahead of the Fan Appreciation Game, our last regular season home game on April 19th. Sens are in Laval for 3 straight against the Rocket, who are leading the division as of the recording of this podcast on March 12th. So there's a lot of important games to come. There's a lot of important games both at home and away. And again, hopefully the home games are well attended. And, the guys have already been talking. The guys who were here last year through that playoff run were already talking about how they can't wait for that atmosphere to return to CAA Arena. And I think we all understand that, playoff atmosphere doesn't necessarily come in October. It doesn't come in November or even January. But in March, with less than 20 games left to play, that's when it starts to ramp up. And you don't have to wait until April to get that kind of feeling, that vibe around the rink, around the city. And I think that's something that will help to propel this team if they can get that support and have kind of everybody here in the Bay of Quinte pushing in the right direction here.
For sure, yeah, and taking advantage of, like we say, those teams that are beneath them. And again, that's not to say that they're gimme games either, because of the fact that Bridgeport's going to want to try and play spoiler. Utica, they don't play them yet anymore this season, but a team like that will want to be a spoiler. So you got to really venture yourself down and really realize the importance of playing a hard 60 minutes. And, of course, like you said, the atmosphere helps, and the fan support was so great for Belleville last year. And it seems like it's kind of carried over into this year. And with it being March and April, as long as the people are still interested in coming out and there's good weather and everything all works out in its favor, then we should see some pretty raucous crowds here at the old Yardman Arena.
That's right. So that is kind of the general update of how things have been going. It's been up and down. January was not great. February was really good. And March, the guys are kind of finding that consistency. And, this is the first real practice that this team has had in weeks. So they can sharpen up a little bit and prepare for this big homestand that's coming up. We'll talk about the homestand later on in the show. We've got some notes to tease you on in terms of changes to ticketing and our season seat membership renewals, etc. We've got a bunch of promo games coming up this month that we want to highlight as well. But when we come back, Senators are tied for that last playoff spot in the North Division. We'll break down the North Division playoff picture a little bit, give you a sense of where the other teams are at as well, and what Belleville might have to do to not only qualify, get into fifth place, Brock, but third place is within striking distance, and you avoid that first round best of 3 series, you're going to extend your season that much longer. So we'll talk about that on the other side of the break as this episode of the Belleville Sens podcast continues. Season 3 and a long-awaited episode 13 on the Belleville Sens Entertainment Network.
March is make or break time. Playoffs are coming. Be there for your Belleville Senators.
Hit ball around off some defenders. Brookshank gets stoned, but then he scores!
Friday, March 14th, 7 p.m. Sens play Bridgeport Islanders, AHL affiliate of the New York Islanders, for Sens Stampede Night, presented by Cool 100. And get ready for country fun and music with special games at intermission. More at BellevilleSens.com. Support your Sens this March.
Go, Sens, go!
It is the Belleville Sens podcast, season number 3, episode 13, as we kick off the playoff push here at CAA Arena. David Foot and Brock Ormond here. The Senators are back from what felt like a month and a half away from home. Even when they were back at CAA Arena, they were in for 1 game or 2 games and then back gone for 3 or 4 again. Not the case anymore. Basically, the rest of March, the Senators are home, save for 1 quick trip to Toronto in a 3-3 weekend in a couple of weeks. And as we talked about in our opening segment, the Senators are going to need to make this a difficult place to play. They can't do that on their own. They need the support of the hockey fans here in the Bay of Quinte and all of 613 countries, stretching right out to the nation's capital as well. So much momentum around the Senators as a whole right now, the NHL team, of course the AHL team here in Belleville. You can be part of the action by heading to Ticketmaster.ca or BellevilleSens.com and get your tickets to be here and help push the boys towards the Calder Cup playoffs. And it's not going to be easy to get there. It never is in the American Hockey League in general, but especially as we've learned over now 8 seasons in the North Division, never easy. It's always about as complicated and as tight a race as you can have, and no different here this year with Belleville currently tied with the Syracuse Crunch on points. They've caught up to almost everybody in terms of the games in hand that they held. Belleville had like 5 or 6 games in hand on some opponents at one point, but we're kind of back into that territory now, Brock, where we can look at the AHL's playoff primer, which they post on the AHL.com every morning leading up to the Calder Cup playoffs. We can look at this and we can really get a picture of what the Senators are going to have to do to qualify.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's going to be an uphill battle, and that slope is going to be awfully tough to climb. But the way that things are going, the Sens should be very much in the mix till the final days of the season. And remember the dramatics from last year with Igor Sokolov scoring in the empty net to win Belleville a playoff spot over a team that was chasing them in the Laval Rocket, a rival team, which certainly made it that much sweeter. And you hear all the talk about. This is we're playing playoff hockey with 15 or 20 games left in the season. That's pretty much it in the sense of you gotta dig in a little deeper and start putting more charge into your step, and certainly the guys have done that, and they're going to need to keep doing that because it's going to be a lot of good teams in the likes of Toronto and Laval, Rochester, Cleveland. All throughout the way Providence too. They were tough out back in October earlier in the season. Can't imagine their game plan changes at all. So it's going to be one heck of a race, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, remaining opponents for the Senators, and again, 10 of the next 11 games will be played at home, and those are 10 of the Belleville Sens' remaining 11 home games as well. The 11th is April 19th, the last game of the season, finishing 3 straight against the Laval Rocket. But the Sens will have Bridgeport twice. They'll have Toronto at least 3 times. They'll have Rochester 3 times consecutively, actually, April 4, 5, and 9. They're going to go to Springfield. You mentioned Providence. They're going to go there, and you're right. The Providence Bruins have kept their momentum from last season. They are right in a battle for second place, almost first place in the Atlantic Division. And then outside of the 5 games against Atlantic Division opponents, the other 12 are inside the division with Rochester, Laval, Toronto, and they do have one Syracuse game still at home as well. And that on April 2nd might be, at this point, it's got to be circled as the biggest game of the season because that's the only opportunity Belleville's going to have to directly make up points or keep points out of the hands of the Syracuse Crunch. If we've seen, throughout this entire kind of stretch, when Belleville wins, everybody else seems to win. And if Belleville loses, everybody else still seems to win. And it's very difficult to make up ground and to extend and pad your lead in these standings. Those 12 divisional games are so critical. Yeah,
absolutely. And those head-to-heads, they're like, as you say, the 4-point games. And if you can get 2 without the benefit of an extra point for an overtime or shootout loss against a team that you're directly in a battle with, like you said, David, that is so massive, and you can't quantify how huge that is, especially a Syracuse team that came back with a little bit of anger and frustration perhaps from last year after the Sens absolutely dominated them, winning 7 of 8 games. Been a little more even, though, this year, and actually Syracuse, if I'm not mistaken, has the upper hand on Belleville in terms of head-to-head records. So
yeah, and so that's the first thing, I guess. The playoff qualification can seem complicated as it is because it's not as set and standard and regular as the NHL is. More teams qualify in the AHL. All the divisions have different numbers of teams. So, it's confusing on that sense. But then you move on to the tiebreakers. And right now, Belleville and Syracuse are tied on points. They each have 60 points. They each have 17 games remaining. And you mentioned the head-to-head. Thankfully for Belleville, that's not the first tiebreaker. The first tiebreaker is just regulation wins. So not counting games won in shootouts, not counting games won in overtime. And right now the Syracuse Crunch have 19. The Belleville Sens have 18. So it's that close. And you remember back at the start of the season, the Sens were on that run of a shootout every other game basically. And at that point, back in October, November, you go, well, it's early in the year. We're picking up points. That's the important thing. At least we're grabbing points. Well, here we are 4 or 5 months later, and you go, boy, it would have been nice to have 2 more of those in regulation time just for the tiebreaker, never mind the extra couple of points you get. That's how tight it is.
Yeah, and you regret sometimes having games lost, too, and when you get into those overtime shootouts. And, the whole thing early on is just picking up points and keeping yourselves competitive. Now it's getting into a tough part where, all it takes is one bad break the other way. There's a tie game. You go to an overtime or a shootout, and you lose an opportunity at getting a regulation win. I remember one game the Sens had a 3-0 lead, I think middle of November, 15th or 16th, against Toronto, had a 3-0 lead, and then they come back. Marlies come back with 3 goals in the last probably 9 or 10 minutes. They tie it, go to overtime. Belleville ends up winning in the shootout in that long, I'm pretty sure that was the 12-round shootout or 13-round shootout. But you think Belleville looked like they were in full control, and then all of a sudden you see that slip away. I mean, you don't think at the time that it's going to come back to maybe be the difference in the end, but sometimes it will. And, of course, you got to find ways to really lock things down in regulation, and that's been David Bell's mantra, is playing that responsible style that when you get up, which the Sens, admittedly, they haven't scored first, and they've had a tough time. They've tried to come back in every game. And for Coach David Bell, he said the mantra is get ahead and then lock it down and be responsible. And the Sens have been doing a bit better at that lately. But, all it takes is just one blown lead or one bad bounce in the last 15 seconds, and all of a sudden you're in big trouble.
And that's not to say that the Senators are in trouble right now because they, didn't win those games in regulation earlier in the year. It just kind of gives a picture of how important every single game is, even if it's back in October at the start of the season. But let's give you a bit of a picture of what the rest of the division looks like right now, because it might seem, Belleville's been in 5th, 6th, 7th at times for the last few months and just kind of hovering around those spots, but they're not far away from 4th place. They're only 6 points back of the Cleveland Monsters with 2 head-to-head games against Cleveland, so there's technically, 4-point swings in both of those games against the Monsters. They're only 7 points back of Toronto, and they're playing Toronto 3 times at least before the end of the season. So there's 3 sets of 4-point swings. And that's kind of, I think, the milestone or the goal really is you want to get into that third place spot, skip that first round series that the Senators have had to play in the first 2 times they qualified for the Calder Cup playoffs. But if you want to extrapolate even further, Rochester has 74 points, so that is, again, 14 points ahead. That's a little bit daunting, but they fall, you don't, and you beat them in all the head-to-head meetings you have. Like, a lot can happen, I guess, is basically my point from here on out. And the Senators will have a lot of their playoff destiny in their own control here.
For sure, and all those divisional games, too, are so important because if you win 8 out of 12 or 9 out of 12, then, you're progressing up the standings, but you go the other way and you lose those games and, you could say pretty much bye-bye to the playoffs. So that's what makes it so fun about the AHL because in a league like the NHL, you play your own division, 3 or 4 times? You play every team at least twice.
Yep.
So that makes it a little, not to say that, the games are any less important, but the difference is you're playing every team. So you're not making up as many points head to head. The AHL, every game is so intense because of the fact you're playing your division so many times, 8 times 10 and 12. So and 6 for some as well. So it's going to be really exciting to see how this whole thing maps out, just like it was last year. It was such a fun ride at the end, and you think of all the clutch goals that were scored too by guys like Igor Sokolov, like Wyatt Bongiovanni, like Stephen Halliday with all of his assists, and then he ramps up the goal scoring in the playoffs. And all in all, it's just so interesting to see. And the races sometimes can feel like series, like playoff series, because of how intense you got to play, how many times you play certain teams. And like you mentioned, David, 3 in a row against Rochester, and then you got a couple back-to-back against Laval. So it's almost going to feel like a best-of-3 series right now, or right in the last couple weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, again, even these back-to-back games against Cleveland, they're 3 days apart, but they're still back-to-back against a team that you're chasing in the standings. So there's so many important games coming. If you're into the numbers, the magic number, which is the number of points that a team needs to earn to clinch a playoff spot for the Belleville Senators right now, the magic number is 35, and the Senators have 34 points to gain. If you're like me and you're not good at math, you might look at that and go, well, how do you get 35 points if you only have 34 points to gain? Well, anytime anybody else, I guess the last team that cannot qualify, anytime they lose points is when you would also have more come off of your magic number. The Senators are that team right now. So anytime Syracuse loses points, Belleville's magic number will shrink. Anytime Belleville gains points, Belleville's magic number will shrink. And that's just the goal. Accumulate points because of the tiebreaker, the first tiebreaker, win in regulation time, and as we said earlier on, try to defend home ice. I think those have to be the keys for Belleville over these final 17 games. Yeah,
absolutely, and there's no sugarcoating at the effort. 60-minute effort needs to be there, and even if you don't win, at the very least, accruing points is so crucial, and the biggest thing is don't leave anything on the table because it's going to be a grind, and you're going to have to dig deep. There's only a month or a bit left in the season, and of course, Dave Bell will expect nothing less than a full 110% effort from these guys, and it seems like practice today has been at that level, or close to it.
Again, they haven't been home to practice for a while. They're maybe buoyed a little bit by the crowd here, a few hundred out for our March break open practice. There's lots happening here at CAA Arena this week for March break. Again, the 2 games against the Bridgeport Islanders, AHL affiliate of the New York Islanders, coming up on Friday with our Sens Stampede, and Saturday with our St. Patrick's Day game. There's some great deals at the locker room store in terms of the Belleville Sens merchandise right now. We'll fill you in on some of that stuff, more of the promos that are coming up in March, and some, again, teases on ticketing changes when we come back for segment 3 of this episode of the Belleville Sens podcast. Stay with us.
The Belleville Senators want to game up your group outings. cheer from the stands, or get close with exclusive experiences, Sens group packages have something for everyone. They offer unique perks, amazing deals. Your group of 10 or more will receive a discounted rate, starting at $22 per ticket. Perfect for celebrations, team building, or just a great night out. See the next generation of NHL stars. Visit BellevilleSens.com or email tickets@BellevilleSens.com. Game up your group outing.
Continuing on this episode of the Belleville Sens podcast, Brock and I are back after a couple of busy months for the Belleville Senators. Again, the playoff hunt is officially on, though. Less than 20 games to play. A bunch of them coming up here at CAA Arena this month. And we'd love for you to be in the building as well. Our director of ticket sales, Alex Pickford, wanted us to pass along that there are some changes coming to the ticketing at CAA Arena for Belleville Sens games. Kind of the way we align things, some new offers. Basically, it's all going to be for the better, for you, the fans, to make your life easier and to make that experience much better for you in terms of ticket buying and everything else. Plus, our renewal campaign for our season seat members will start in early April. So stay tuned as well to the Belleville Sens social feeds at Belleville Sens, and that's the best way to take in the action is as a season seat member. So many perks and benefits, and the value is fantastic as well when you become a Belleville Sens season seat member. All the details will be at BellevilleSens.com. You can do a little reading now, and again, those changes and renewals will start in just a few weeks, because it's already mid-March, which is still kind of crazy and hard to believe. This will be our last segment on the show this week. Want to talk a little bit about what's happening at the rink over the next few weeks. We have to talk about the NHL trade deadline that passed. The AHL trade deadline is coming this Friday, and because we're home, Brock and I will likely have another show in the next week or so that we can recap that stuff. But, we want to tell you what's going on here this week. We want to tell you about some great deals at the Locker Room store, and we'll talk a little bit about the roster here and just how different it kind of looks right now. Ottawa was kind of a star almost at the NHL trade deadline. They were right in the spotlight, which they aren't always, and made a couple of big moves that certainly supplemented what's happening in Ottawa and the roster they have there. A couple of trades that are maybe going to not upset, but be tough to digest for some Belleville Sens fans, given the players that have gone out of the organization. But the players that have come back are all going to really bolster the Senators as a whole. And at the end of the day, a positive trade deadline for the Ottawa Senators. Those moves included a couple of former Belleville Senators headed to Buffalo. Jacob Bernard-Docker and Josh Norris were traded for Dylan Cousins, and that has already paid off in spades for the Ottawa Senators. Cousins with points in 3 straight games since joining the team. Big game winner the other night. But always tough to see a couple of guys that you watch develop and grow here in Belleville have to leave the organization. Josh Norris is the best rookie in franchise history, essentially. Jacob Bernard-Docker, one of the top defenders that's ever played for the Belleville Sens. So tough to see those guys leave. What's perhaps more difficult was the second trade. It happened in minutes left, seconds left before the NHL trade deadline. And Sens GM Steve Staios sending Zach Ostapchuk to San Jose as part of a package to bring Fabian Zetterlund back. And Zetterlund is up with the Ottawa Senators, but also part of that package was Tristan Robbins, who's a shifty early 20s forward who's played his entire AHL career, 151 games now with San Jose, and he comes back the other way, but he's here in Belleville and has played 1 game with the Senators, and with 1 new face that goes out, again, Zach Ostapchuk had a nice following here. A new face comes in, and somebody that adds another, maybe a different element perhaps to this team than they've had.
Yeah, and a guy that, seems like he's pretty grateful to be playing professional hockey. Had a unique kind of career and unique kind of life. I know he was born in England, like in the UK, and ended up playing in the Western Hockey League after moving to Canada and with Saskatoon. And he's, found his way to the East Coast really for the first time in his career. And it just seemed like when he talked to you over the weekend, David, he was so grateful to be in Belleville and get another chance because, sure, it sucks to get traded, but at the same time, when you get traded, it means that another team does want you. And, just like Belleville had to give up on Zach Ostapchuk, not give up on him, but get him another opportunity. And, with that comes another opportunity back the other way for the guy you're getting, or guys in some cases. So nice to see Tristan Robbins here, and he did get into his first game on Sunday too, so that was nice.
Yeah, he's out there shooting pucks right now as our open practice here starts to wind down a little bit. I think the biggest example for Belleville Sens fans, to your point there, Brock, about change of scenery and seizing that opportunity in a new place, you don't have to look any further than number 5 on the Belleville roster, and Wyatt Bongiovanni coming over from the Manitoba Moose at the AHL trade deadline last year. So a little bit different in that sense, but same situation. He comes over from Manitoba where he maybe wasn't getting the shot that he needed or perhaps felt that he deserved. He gets thrown right into the mix here in Belleville with the Senators, and he ends up scoring some of the biggest goals in the franchise's history to this point and has carried that through this year, barring some injuries as well. So it'll be really exciting to see what Tristan Robbins can do. Well, we were going to play the interview from last week, but I think we're just going to try to catch up with him again once he's been back and settled into Belleville, and we can really see how he's kind of adjusting and how he feels about things now that he's here. But certainly that was the biggest impact on the Belleville Sens from the NHL trade deadline, and I think it will be a good impact at the end of the day. And obviously we wish Zach Ostapchuk, Josh Norris, JBD all the best in their future endeavors. And I think we're all glad that Ostapchuk is not playing in the Eastern Conference, for sure.
Absolutely.
The Sens don't have to see him. And Josh Norris and JBD, for all intents and purposes, won't end up in Rochester, you wouldn't think, at any time. So you won't have to see them. You know who Belleville Sens will have to see in Rochester, though, probably coming up in the next few weeks, Eric Brandstrom. Just traded over there recently as well.
Yeah,
so
good point. Yeah.
Familiar names all over the American Hockey League as the playoff push continues. With that in mind, want to pass along some great deals happening at the Locker Room store here and some of the other stuff that's happening this week on March break at CAA Arena. This was a big event, our open practice, and so glad to see so many people, so many kids here up on the glass, and again, getting an up close and personal look at a professional practice. And for some folks that maybe you don't get to the game early enough, you're not here for the warm-up, you don't get a chance to get right down to the glass and actually get an appreciation for how big these guys are and how fast they move and just the skill that they possess. You can see so much more of that in a practice situation as opposed to a game. So it's great to see that, so many kids are out here and watching. Another part of our March break madness, if you will, is our locker room store sale. And until March the 15th, so for 3 more days till the end of this week, you can head to the locker room store at the Quinte Sports and Wellness Center or at the Gate 2 merchandise stand on game nights. And deals include 30% off T-shirts, 25% off toques, jerseys, and jersey customizations, and 20% off of hats. So if you've got a blank Belleville Sens jersey, that 25% off lettering is a nice value. If you're looking for a jersey, 25% off is a nice value. And, of course, the T-shirts, the hats, all of that stuff. Look, now's the time to get geared up. It's playoff time. I want to see Belleville Sens gear all over town. Brock's wearing his hat. I've been wearing mine out all the time. And you can get geared up at a fraction of the cost with the locker room store. Shop.bellevillesens.com if you want to shop online as well. So that's a big thing happening this week. And then also right now, our March break BOGO sale. Buy a ticket for our next-gen game coming up on March 23rd, and that's going to be fun because we've got our fan-designed jerseys, and we'll have lots of stuff happening for the kids. We'll have our guest PA announcer, our junior reporter, our junior in-arena host, all that happening on March the 23rd. And perhaps what's most important is that's against the Cleveland Monsters. So that is a massive game in terms of the playoff race, as we talked about earlier. But if you buy a ticket to that game, you will get a complimentary ticket to another one of Belleville's remaining home games. All the details are at bellevillesens.com. So that's a fantastic opportunity. And then this Friday, we've got Country Night, or Sens Stampede, presented by Cool 100. And then on Saturday, we've got St. Patrick's Day, and we've got our Community Heroes Night coming up, and Road to the AHL Night is coming. I just got our first look at this year's trading cards, and they're fantastic. Long story short, plenty of stuff happening at the rink this month, and we'd love you to be here. Ticketmaster.ca or BellevilleSens.com for more information on tickets. It's going to be a sprint here for the next week or so. We all are talking about how nice it is to be home. It's going to be real busy, and I think in a good way.
Yeah, for sure. And, as much as, there's a bonding opportunity and there's chances to get together and meld closer as a team on the road. When you're at home, like we mentioned earlier, being in your own beds with your own facilities and not having to worry about, gathering all your stuff and, getting on the bus and driving up. It's nice to just stay home and get all your reps in and get an opportunity to really steal some big games away from some teams that are ahead of you in the standings and close that gap and try to recreate some of that magic from late last season and even maybe get a series win like Belleville did. Last year when they took over fourth place against Toronto, that turned out to be massive as well because of the fact they got the 2 home games and they got an overtime win to win their first ever playoff series. So I imagine that it's going to be that tight again, and with the way things are in the division, you just never know who's going to come flying out of the blue, and Belleville certainly did that last year, and I'm sure they'll be doing it again this season.
And again, the American Hockey League updates its playoff primer daily at around 10 a.m. or earlier. The AHL.com. That'll give you the most in-depth picture of what the Sens need to do to qualify. Again, as of this Wednesday morning, the 12th of March, Senators tied with Syracuse Crunch with 60 points for the final playoff spot. Syracuse has the tiebreaker. Senators will play Bridgeport at home twice this week. Syracuse plays at home against Utica actually tonight, so we'll have an eye on the scoreboard there. And then they are home to Springfield and at Springfield this weekend. We didn't even really talk about the Utica Comets or anybody who's behind Belleville, but the Comets and the Crunch are playing each other a bunch, and as much as you want Syracuse to lose, Utica winning gets them that much closer as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how that shakes down as well, with the Senators trying to catch everybody, but also keep the Comets off their tail because they won't play them again for the rest of the season. So it's all in their own hands right now.
It's a balancing effort. It's a balancing effort, that's for sure. And, Utica, talk about a back-and-forth season series, too. We finished with them, or the Sens finished with them, I think about almost a month ago now, and boy, talk about a back-and-forth season series between those two teams. And, again, points left on the table for both sides. But now you got to worry about them coming from behind because of the fact that you can't directly snag points and wins away from them. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes down. But the Comets certainly a much improved team from earlier in the year when they couldn't seem to buy a win in the first month or two of the season.
Senators will be able to either get as high as likely third, potentially second if Rochester loses out and Belleville wins out. They could also drop all the way down, though we don't think that's going to happen because they're playing some pretty good hockey. One more reminder, Bridgeport on Friday and Saturday this weekend. More home games the rest of the month. Schedule at BellevilleSens.com, ticket info at BellevilleSens.com, and we are looking forward to seeing you here at CAA Arena over the coming months. We'll wrap it up with that for Brock Ormond. David Foot, thanking you for joining us again for the Belleville Sens podcast. Stay tuned to Sens socials at Belleville Sens for all the latest, including when our next episode is. You can find it there. Until then, we'll chat soon and enjoy the push to the Calder Cup playoffs.